so much for being here today.
Thank you very much, Chris. And I can call you Chris, right? Because you said Christopher, and I'm like, oh, I've been underselling you all this time.
You can call me Chris or Christopher, whichever you like, for sure.
Awesome. So, Christopher, please begin.
You know, I heard something about you, and this is going to be my first question I'm going to ask you. Talk to me about the Diversity Council that you founded or co-founded with Sirius XM. Is that right?
So I was the first programming member. I'm a founding member, right? Like that's how it goes. Somebody else had the idea, and basically what happened was, we're all familiar with the story of George Floyd, and it's so traumatic. I try not to think about it specifically because it's disturbing, but at that moment, like a lot of people, SiriusXM Canada did some soul searching. The American side of the company, I think, is a bit further ahead in that regard. They're sort of on the ground with it a bit more than we are in Canada. And somebody else kind of came up with the idea of this council, and there were open nominations from all departments, all backgrounds to sort of come in, and I was the one person from programming who was part of that council. And the early stages of it were so basic as where are we, what is even the makeup of our staff, and what do we need to address. And we did a lot of internal studies, internal education. We brought a lot of guest speakers in, and I have colleagues who actually continue to do that, because at a certain point I stepped away just because I had more responsibility. So I have another member of the programming team who's jumped in there. And some of the stuff we came away with was so shocking. Even the hiring rates, right? Like if you're somebody like me, and for lack of a better term, you're not white, your hiring rate in Canada is about 10% less than someone who's a white male. And that it seems so hard to grasp, because it can be completely subconscious, right? It cannot be malicious. It cannot be intended. It could just be, the person who runs the company likes golfing, and you didn't have a background that makes you, part of that culture. So you're not the guy on the golf course. And then even when you get into a corporation like SiriusXM, maybe you're not the person who does that or is on the company softball team, and, or it's harder for you to network. And I think it was such an educational process. And there's so many, different facets to it, and we're still learning and growing. But it certainly, emboldened me in terms of my journey, because at the same time, I sort of made a transition from doing a daily show with a co-host to doing my own show, the Bilal Vakani Hour, on Canada Talks. And while I was learning all this stuff, I simultaneously became the first person of color to do a show on that channel. And, I had to sort of decide along with my bosses, is this all going to be about diversity? And the interesting thing was, my reaction was no, because I'm still a regular person like any other Canadian in this country who just wants to talk about the things I'm passionate about. But my perspective and my ability to go after those issues um, is heightened, not even so much because of my background, but because I had access to tools from SiriusXM Canada and experts, where I now recognize how my background, how it fits into the greater picture of Canada. And I'll stop there. Otherwise, this is going to become a TED talk. But it really widened, not just my eyes, but basically everyone in our organization.
Well, Balani talk for sure. So talk to me about your show, Canada Talks. What can we expect when we tune in? We dial into Sirius XM 167. We grab Canada Talks. We got the Bilal Vakani Hour. What am I listening to?
So I'll go broad on the channel, right? Because like I'm pretty great, but I work with Peter Mansbridge, who a lot of people will remember from the National. So every morning I wake up, Peter every weekday's got a brand new podcast. We air that at noon and 5 p.m. Eastern, and it's Peter. He's got Chantal Hebert, he's got Bruce Anderson, he's got a lot of the people you know and remember from his panels on the National at issue, which a lot of us watched. But then Peter will actually on Thursdays just take listener email. And you could imagine when Peter Mansbridge puts his email address out there, he gets email from all over, not just the country, but the world. And he's taken basically a podcast he started during the pandemic, and he's transitioned it to a Sirius XM show. We have Bob McCowan and John Shannon who do the Bob McCowan podcast. I work with them as well. And, they just the other day, they had the owner of the Dallas Stars, who's, this great Vancouver boy who was just waiting, just bugging Gary Bettman for the right opportunity to own a team in the NHL. And that was just yesterday's show. So we have those two names along with, a daily lineup, which I couldn't possibly all plug them all at this time. And then also, Amber Mack, Eric Alper, people who are, whether it's tech, whether it's music, sort of top of their field. So the Canada Talks channel is this great cross section of all these different experts and opinionators and journalists. And then we also have a bunch of sports, the majority of Raptor games, a bunch of NHL. I could go on and on, but it's kind of your one-stop shop for Canadian talks and a bit of sports programming on Sirius XM. So when you need a break from Howard Stern or our American friends, we're there for you.
Wonderful. I like that little drop. Yeah, Howard Stern. So you're a senior host, is that correct?
So, well, I feel old now. So senior producer of podcast operations. I guess I'm more of a junior host because this is always such a weird thing when, and I'm not even sure if I agree with what I just said. This industry is so fluid, right? So I started a decade ago at TSN 1050 and I was predominantly a producer, but after a few years, they made me the Jays fan reporter. And I always submitted on-air stuff, and I always had on-air stuff play. And then after about 5 years, and I also worked at TSN Sports Center, but we don't talk about that. After about 5 years, I went to Sirius XM, and within a few months, I became one of the anchors for their Scoreboard channel, which is a sports update channel we run. MLB Network Radio, the official Sirius XM channel of Major League Baseball, has also contracted me out as a reporter. So I can't say I'm a senior host because reporting and hosting, as you well know, are sort of different fields. But I'm certainly the senior producer of podcast operations. And I guess I would say medium, average experienced host, depending on how we categorize the various reporting and different things I've done over the years.
So how did you get involved with Sirius XM? Is there, you go to their career page and say, hey, here I am, I want to do it. Like, walk me through how that whole application process for you, for Sirius XM, and where you are today. How did that journey look?
So for me, it's very, very different because I was at TSN 1050. It actually ties into the TSN thing. So I had tried to work at Sports Center as a writer because I had some connections there, and it didn't work. After 3 months, they said just go back and do radio. And when I came, and I was doing radio throughout it, but essentially I was working at both. I was working at TSN 1050, and I was working at TSN Sports Center as a writer for about 3 to 4 months. I was doing both jobs. And because of that, I did very, very little on the radio side, and I was predominantly doing the television. But when the television thing ended, I refocused on the radio. I did a little bit of shadowing to kind of re-up my skills. And because of that initiative I showed at the time, they asked me to work with some fill-in hosts. And one of the fill-in hosts was a Sirius XM personality, and it's a long story. But they essentially advocated for me to come over. And when I came over, sort of in an operator's role, I also kind of became the producer. And then I started doing the interviews. Then I started doing the sports updates. Then I started doing sports broadcasts. Then I started doing music shows. Then, and it just kept going and going and going. But it's sort of a non-traditional path because of everyone we've brought in since, that hasn't happened again. Typically, we have a couple of colleges and universities we work with. And through those relationships, we have interns. I have one who interned with me, got hired after the intern, and now he operates about half of our live lineup on Canada Talks, and he's a great young man. And then we also have sort of those open applications. If you go to SiriusXM.ca and you go down through the careers page, there will be sort of rotating internships and positions as they open up. I think recently we added a Mixtape North, which is a hip hop channel. So we were sort of hiring for that and a variety of music positions on a programming level. But obviously these, the difference between running a music channel and being an intern is, arguably a gap of about a decade of experience. So opportunities will vary based on availability. But there are stories of people who started in accounting or in other departments and actually transitioned into the programming department. So there's many roads that kind of can lead you to that programming department, and mine was one of the more unusual, I would say.
Wonderful. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back.